I wrote an incredibly long piece after forcing the dreamers to write really short pieces. So it's very professorial. But I was trying to write every day about this, and I couldn't because I cried. So a professional shit helps. I think that St. Augustine's Confessions are the very root of modern writing. It's a book of fiction that doesn't tell its name. Previous to Averroes' translation to Latin, Aristotle's writings, the Confessions is the last book of the classic tradition and the first one of this shaky humanity we form part of. Desperate to explain its place in the world, to organizing memories, inventions, ideas, mythical stories in a page that could give sense to a life. Dear Christian nativists, I have beautiful news for you. The very vortex and matrix of modern European culture was an African man. But modern storytelling has a birth moment too. In the second part of Miguel de Cervantes' Don Quixote himself reads the first part of his novel and finds it not that good. So he embarks in a second trip out of his town in La Mancha to give the author of the novel, whoever he may be, another chance to write a better, more edifying tale. His plan works. That coming and going in and out of the book represents the foundational moment for what we all in this room have been loving for the last 400 years. Fiction is about many things, but for it to be literature, it has to tell too how it was written. It is necessarily a work of suspended work in progress, because novels are about war, love, solitude, solace, the unknown, etc., but they all have one thing in common. They all are about how they were written too. That was Cervantes' gift to us. And I have beautiful news for the Christian English-only nativist brothers and sisters of us. It was written in Spanish by a rationalist, recent Jewish convert. When the Turkish Rabbi Saul de Tarsus, that's enough to say for the nativist crew, was asked about the role of a common person in the new revolutionary form of Judaism he was helping to found, he said that the sole duty of a person was to give testimony of the world she or he was living in. From a contemporary point of view, this idea of St. Paul, as so many of his, keeps resonating in a strange, incredibly smart vision. We the humans are only cells working to keep the great body of the superior creature of language evolving. What we are about to hear is the testimony in progress of 9 brilliant young writers who have lived in an extraordinary period of time. The materials go from fiction to memory to ideas to mythical stories. I can't tell what is real and what is not. That's why I call it lit. They are short excerpts of works in progress, reward for the purpose of this public reading with other more experienced writers, editors, and translators. Yelena Akteroshkaya, Kathleen Alcott, Heather Cleary, Francisco Goldman, Reina Grande, Valeria Luiselli, Helen Oyamemi, Laura Persiasepe, and John Gray close lines with us in the last days, showing that even in the ultra-banal context of a literary festival, the Olympics of ego and frivolity, is the word and its unbelievable ability to get organized in stories what keep us human. I wish I had a medal for this bunch of artists of their trade whose work I admire so much. I don't, but I have a name. They are the Undreamers, as they didn't got much sleep these days working hard with us for this event. The poet José Emilio Pacheco used to say that written fiction has survived the film industry, the magazine industry, the internet, and all of its enemies because it is still the best technology we have to get into the skin of the others, to incorporate the experience of the other in minds. It's true. The power of literary stories has to do with that. The more we read, the more memories we have to inhabit us. Reading stories make us deeply human, beautiful failures en route to civil redemption. There is a monster around these days, an evil man who hardly hides his racist remarks under the legaloid terms the undocumented. One of every 4 American brothers and sisters of mine think that he has a point. He has a point. That's what, sorry, I get so mad that I get lost. That's what a white dentist told me. He has a point. That's what a black neighbor of mine told me. He has a point. That's what a Latina nurse told me. He has a point. Well, he doesn't. I will not tell his name, as he decided to lose it and make it a brand for tacky merchandise. And I don't want to puke in front of all of you. We are together here in this church of poetry and civil freedom that is the Nuyorican Cafe to stand next to the dreamers, the bravest, toughest kids I've met in a city that have given us shelter, education, and sense of belonging to a community smart and diverse and stimulant as no other in the world. Praised be our Babylon and their golden children that will reign tonight. The other day, I hear Lena Dunham say that she will migrate to Canada if the monster wins. The gesture is nice, shows support for us, the public insulted and dehumanized in full stadiums and national TV every damn day in the last months. A few weeks ago, during a double interview with Valeria Luiselli, my wife, we were asked what we would do if the monster won. I did the Dunham. I'm privileged too. I suppose we would leave, I said. No, Valeria said. This is the moment when we stand up and fight back. She works with migrant children, resisting deportation in the court, so she knows better. A dreamer cannot leave to Canada and cannot go back home because home is Queens, home is Bronx, home is Brooklyn, home is Manhattan, home is Staten Island. So we stand, so we stay, we stand, we resist, we fight. I have bad news for the monster. There are people with names here and they are standing in front of fear. Yes, I have bad news for the monster. Jessica Cero is in the room and she's standing. Erika Apulapo is in the room and she's standing. Mariana Arias Patiño is in the room and she's standing. I have to finish. Steviana Elba is in the room and she's fucking standing. Apolinar Islas is in the room and he's standing. Nancy Lopez Ramirez is in the room and she's standing. Gabriela Martinez is in the room and she is standing. Miguel de los Santos is in the room and he is standing. Dale St. Mart is in the room and he is standing. We are writers, but we are a message addressed to the monster too. Bring it on, motherfucker. Bring it on. We are here waiting for you. We have the superpower of telling stories. So rock the boat.
Hi everyone. Thanks for coming. I call this the Grand Canyon of Manhattan. Los ojos de mi mente se abrieron lo más que pudieron para así alcanzar a abarcar el gran cañón que me veía llegar y que fue lo único que me dijo hi, welcome to the universe where stars crash and the moon dance all night. Y durante el día los ríos de ruidos, gente y autos corren al agua en busca del mar. The coyotes were howling as I walked behind a 32-year-old woman and her 2 kids, 6 and 8. There were others. I was cold and scared, not of the coyotes, but that they would leave me forgotten in the desert, like the governments of Mexico and the United States have. The silence was terrifying. It was eternal. And then I was one of the darkest and coldest I can remember. Thinking about how each step brought me closer to the other side and farther from my mother, a feather sliced in half by the border. I missed the sun so much that night. I cried silently for my family. I cried for a long time and I won't anymore. I tried to bear the pain under each step before it ate away my hope. of returning to the place that taught me the meaning of life, the place I was forced to live in the depths of the daylight. I didn't know where we were. I didn't want to leave Mexico. I had to. We crossed a highway. A car was waiting. Hurry up, get in, the coyote hissed. And he did, and we did. I got into the truck with another kid. Underneath us were the feet of the others, who would travel under the back seat. Our coyote had become a pollero. We were treated like chickens, crammed into a cardboard box, headed to a different farm or to the kitchen table. He took us to a house full of other migrants. There were many of them, but it felt like no one was there. It was like seeing my future in a crystal ball, a country that never accepted me, and that seems like it would never will. Around 3 in the morning, local time, the pollero asked me to call my sister Mary in New York. I told her that I was already here in the United States of America. I couldn't tell if I was hungry or not, so I decided not to eat. I didn't like hamburgers anyway, since I had never tried one. The air was so heavy as the night that crushed my desire for sleep. The woman who crossed the desert in front of me said that she was getting on a plane to Los Angeles, California, with her 2 kids. My transportation was going to be a minivan. There were about 13 of us, and again, we were treated like chickens. Only this time we were chickens in a canning factory. The seats of the car were taken out so we could sit on the floor. Again, this was a sign of things to come in this country, an indication that in this so-called land of the free, land of opportunity, none of us would have a seat at the table. They told us not to move or make any noise so we wouldn't raise suspicion on the way. They didn't let us to eat or drink enough as we needed to, so we wouldn't have to go to the bathroom. After a few hours, I couldn't feel my legs. It was torture. This suffering has to be worth something, I thought. I had to make the most of my time and go back as soon as possible. Crossing the border between Mexico and the United States was like walking across hot coals, across broken glass. The streets of the USA haven't been any different. It was and is like crossing the desert. Only this walls by the feet of the immigrants to keep us from moving forward. Finally, after a journey of approximately 4 days, we arrived in New York City. We got to Manhattan around midnight. When I got out of the van, I was overcome by awe for the lights that seemed to hang up from the sky like diamonds embedded in the walls of the buildings around me, for the rivers of light and yellow cars that flow through the canyons of Manhattan, for the countless sounds that seem to come from everywhere at once, and for the smells coming from the mountains of garbage bags piled up on the curb. It was bittersweet, icy hot. It was spring, I remember, because things were blooming from the city's pavement. A spring that hangs from Manhattan's skyscrapers, that gushes like waterfalls. The Grand Canyon of Manhattan rose up before me like a colossal iron warrior. It was a gleaming Grand Canyon, enchanted by its depth and majesty. I felt lost, like I was in a labyrinth of lights in a world of giants, made of metal and cement. But it was a Grand Canyon, I'm sure of that. I remember it well. I opened the eyes of my mind as wide as I could to take in the Grand Canyon that saw me arrive, and was the only thing that said to me, hi. Welcome to the universe where stars crash and the moon stands all night. and where during the day, rivers of noises, people in cars, flow towards the waters in search of the sea. This was translated by Heather Clearly. Thank you.
Hi everyone, so my piece for today, I named it Sundays. Okay, let me go. Annoyed that the church service ended an hour late and the commute back home took longer than expected, my family and I would be welcomed by a delightful sense each time we walked into the apartment. I leave for days like Sundays when we used to have big meals after church. The baked macaroni had the crispiest coat of cheddar cheese, scattered with breadcrumbs, and the barbecue sauce on the chicken glistered from every angle. On the rare occasions my mom cooked curry goat stew, it would mysteriously disappear in the silver pot whenever she left the kitchen. My ultimate favorite, however, was a cheesy potato which was seasoned to perfection and sliced into thin circular layers. She would spread it evenly in a glass dish, then bake it for about 45 minutes in the oven until it was golden. You should make it again, I tell my mom. She looks back at me confused. Remember that day when Mommy did that potato thing? I asked my sister. She looks up from her phone and shakes her head from side to side. Maybe it's a figment of your imagination, she jokes. It isn't though. I remember cutting a piece of that baked cheesy potato with my fork and feeling it melt in my mouth. As I chewed slowly, I could taste the cheddar cheese, onions with a hint of black pepper. It is Sunday again, and hunger bites. After feeding the stray cat who I took the liberty of naming Tinker, I walk into the kitchen just in time to see my dad uncover the first pot of food. He lights a fire underneath it, stirs it with a spoon, and then breasts the spoon smeared with beans on the nearby plate. He uncovered the other pots of food and sighs. Your mom doesn't have the will to do anything again, he whispers to me. It's not that we were ungrateful, but the mere sight of the same food every Sunday caused us to lose our appetites quickly. The long-distance phone call back home to my mom's family has taken a toll on her. She watches her parents grow old through video chats and release fond memories through photographs. The fact that she can't go back to our country only deepens her depression. Not only would she be banned for 10 years if she did go back, but she isn't financially stable to make such a drastic move. When I was younger, my mom constantly threatened to commit suicide. Some days, she would lock herself in the bathroom for hours. Although my dad reassured us that she wouldn't do it, my sister and I would wait beside the door, patient. Sorry. My sister and I would wait beside the door patiently until she came out. All the time, she would tell us about how she felt like jumping in front of the train on the way back to work. One particular Sunday, when my sister came to visit, my mom emerged from her room, sat on the edge of the couch and said, "The doctor told me if I hadn't come in today, it would have been fatal. I don't know how much longer I could stay here again. If it wasn't for your brother, I would have went back home a long time ago." No one says anything for a while. I look over to my 8-year-old brother who was watching a show on his tablet. He hadn't heard a word of what was said. I silently thank God for him and promise in my heart to allow him to have a normal childhood. Eventually, my sister checks the time on her watch and breaks the silence by saying she would be leaving soon. Thank you.
Hi everyone, so I decided to go a bit green and save some paper for today. So the title of my story is called Waiting Impatiently. When my mom gets asked why her children had gray hair at such a young age, she always replies, "It runs in the family." My dad has them all over his head, my mother only near her forehead, visible when she pulls her hair back. It's hard for me to tell if I have any because I can only see so much when I brush my hair. Last August, on a bus to our apartment, my parents and I were sitting in front of each other. It was the first time I noticed how much they had changed. Their eye bags were darker under their eyes, and the wrinkles around their hands moved like water flowing down a river. Whenever I looked at these streams, I saw years of change and devotion, while others saw it as aging. We were just heading into the Bronx when my thoughts were interrupted. "Excuse me," says a woman carrying a duffel bag. I moved aside to let her sit next to me. People kept shoveling their feet around to let other passengers in, and I couldn't see my parents anymore. My eyes darted from face to face, not recognizing a single one of them. I looked down to my hands and my hair moved like wings to cover my face. I stared at it and realized how I had never dyed it or gotten any crazy haircut. I came to this country when I was 4 years old, and I have always followed the rules. "Hey, watch it," says an elderly woman as a young man with a bag the size of a tortoise shell rushed past her. I stood up to give her my seat. "Thank you," she replied as she sat down. Now my bag was facing my parents. I see my reflection on the window. I keep looking at it because my hair can no longer hide my face. The more I stare at it, it looks as if I am levitating. I am reminded of a zipper here and think, would my super weakness be my status, my family, my gender? It is getting dark outside, but at least I can see my mom's reflection on the glass. Overhears my mom tells my dad, "¿Te acuerdas cuando estábamos en Mexico?" I hold on tighter to the pole and become disappointed because I can recall any memories of the 2 years I was in Mexico. I always hear the stories of hand-picked mangoes or walks near the river. "Sorry," says a young woman sitting on the opposite side of the pole as she steps on my foot. "It's okay," I reply with a smile and look down as her gaze goes back to her phone screen. When I was younger and my family was invited to birthday parties, I was always scared of clowns. But when I saw a piñata made out of paper mache, an adrenaline rush always came over me. All the children came together as if we were in a music concert, and there was barely any space to move around. Everyone started chanting, "Uno, dos," to get the candy inside the piñata. I wanted to feel that excitement again. I wanted to hug my grandma, but I couldn't because she was in Mexico, many paved streets away from me. When we speak on the phone, she always asks me, "¿Cómo están?" And over time, conversations become messages trapped in a bottle. They become heart-rending to talk about. We then say were her last words when we spoke. We are halfway home and the bus starts to get to the point where you have to put your bag on the floor and make sure you have enough space to hold your balance. Someone is standing by the back doors, and it looks as if their face is inches away from giving the door a smooch. I try to get closer to my parents, but there are too many obstacles in the way. Droplets of sweat start to emerge on the bridge of my nose, and I feel like screaming. I was tired of the commute and thought about how my parents deal with it since they have 2 jobs. Carajo was all I could think of. There are days when my mom tells me with laughter of wanting to take naps in the subway because she's tired. "How do you manage to stay motivated?" I asked her one time, and the response was, "Ustedes son mi motivación." Thank you.
Thank you all. My piece is entitled Totem. Timidly, I picked up the remote from the coffee table as to signify my intent on keeping my mouth shut and turned the TV on. I took another tentative glance at my grandmother. She was smiling at me, relaxed, wearing a tribal pattern dress and her hair in a silvery bun. I watched a good 30 seconds of Pokemon, the show I woke up early to watch, before she remarked, "Isn't technology so wondrous? We don't have a TV back in St. Lucia. Y'all are blessed." "Yeah, I guess." Before I could turn my head back, she asked, "Do you remember Auntie Cheryl?" "No." "Beebs?" "Nuh-uh." "Auntie Deborah?" No." There was a slight pause as she searched the ground for another family member. "What about Ron? He was your age." "No, I don't really remember them." She looked at me for a second slowly. "Well, just know that we pray for you and your family a lot." I felt a small pang of guilt, like someone had poked accusingly at my heart. This whole time I was selfishly trying to sever the conversation by using as few words as possible, when I should have been getting to know the mother of my mother. I said thank you genuinely, and began to recollect what I did remember. I do remember a church. It had a lot of people and the back was half built. I used to play with some kids back there after service. "Oh yes, that was your father's church, my boy. It was very big. Your mother used to play the piano there. I remember our house was really big too, and red, and it had a huge carpet in the middle, and I had my own room, and it was blue. You remember a lot. It was on a hill, and your sister was always scared the house would slide off. She chuckled merrily, the chair shaking with her. Do you remember your uncle's store? I did remember the store distinctly. The front was neon green, and the metal roof was so rusty it was burgundy. I would go there and play in their lawn with some other kids. Often, someone who I presume was my uncle would come out and give us these sweet and tolerant treats, tamarind balls. That was on the hill too. That's right. He was always over there with the other kids. My other memories were too quick and hazy, like I were experiencing them through a viewfinder. They were full of sensations, splotches of color, white sheets, yellow curtain, a sleepy breeze in the morning, a warm night, sand rolling between my toes, smiles all around, and the smoky smell of rusted cashews on bright embers. The church again, laughter and visceral love for life dancing amongst the pews. I could not revisit these memories, which were like dreams. I could only graze them. We put a lot into getting you all up here, to make sure you were healthy. Your parents could not do it by themselves. The amounts of support given by our old community did not register in my young mind fully, but I nodded. For a long time, I thought it was just my father providing for me. Every time during those darkened days, when my deficient immune system required me to spend months in the hospital, I often would turn my head and peer through the bars of the hospital bed, and I would see the dark silhouette of my father, sitting like an angel in exile. I didn't know the frequent flights between two countries were costing so much, or the amount of time I spent in the hospital would amount to a small fortune. But I did understand the sentiment that my life and my existence on this earth was a collective effort, not just by my parents, but a community bonded by love. I saw this old lady, my grandmother, in a new way. From my homeland, from that fleeting section of memories I sometimes recall to feel peaceful, she came like a relic to instill in me a cultural pride. Maybe opening up wasn't a bad idea.
Hi everyone. I'm a bit nervous, but I really want to share this with you. Thank you for coming. So the title is From the Middle of the World to the Capital of the World. It was all a lie. Who would have thought my 4-year-old self would ever be standing in the so-called capital of the world, New York City? Truth was, we were lost, and I just wanted to go home. I knew home as the house that was near my grandmother's and my aunt's houses. Home was where the grass was everywhere, and dogs wandering without any humans claiming them as pets. On the other hand, here in New York City were strange buildings and fire escapes everywhere. My skin didn't feel the burn from the equator on my cheeks anymore. All around us here were gray dented concrete. Where the cars drove by was strictly for the cars. In the city where I was born in Ecuador, cars roamed anywhere. There were no roads. You just had to be careful with the cows and rocks lying heavily on the dirt and grass. There were no high buildings with fire escapes or telephone booths on each corner of the block. Which street were we on? We had no idea about streets and avenues. We didn't know how to read in Spanish, let alone in English. My uncle, who was fluent in English and knew all the places of all the boroughs, anticipated that we would get lost. He had given my mom a napkin with his phone number written on it and lectured us on how to make a call. He told us to go to the booth, put a quarter, dial, and wait for his response. He picked us up that day in his white truck after he finished making his last delivery. It turned out we were 12 blocks away from where we were standing. Who knew a trip to the supermarket would turn to such a big deal? I was told we were in a city in Ecuador. The MTA buses were not tourist buses like how my mom would explain to me, so I would believe we were in Ecuador. This wasn't temporary like how she promised. We were supposed to stay temporarily in this country, but my dad made us overstay the visa time. He didn't want us to return to our home country. She told me that the next time the sun rose, we would all return to Ecuador, but that was a lie. See, in Ecuador, I grew up with Caucasians staring at me saying, "Aw, she's the cutest little thing ever." It was my indigenous appearance. It was my single braid of hair, finally combed to perfection because my mom believed I had to always be well presented. It was my white shirt with hand-sewed flower figures of all colors and all around my neckline. It was my pollera skirt with hand-sewed flower figures on the edge of this bright pink skirt. It was my black burnt chubby cheeks from the equator's heat. The Caucasians who were tourists viewed me as a cute display of the indigenous culture of my country for those reasons. I was exposed to these tourists because my mom would sell handmade souvenirs in a museum in Ingapirca. The tourists would take photos or film me sitting on the ruins of the Inca and would hand me $1. At that time, Ecuador's currency was a sucre, and those who obtained a dollar bill, a US dollar bill, were viewed as the lucky ones. I didn't feel lucky at the time because I had a US dollar bill. I felt lucky because I knew my mom would now buy me a lollipop for looking adorable to the cameras. My mom told me to put the money I earned in my little blue backpack that I never liked to take off. I even wore it here in New York, perhaps in hope of earning more lollipop money. I remember seeing Caucasians walking around Manhattan, but none paid attention to me like those in Ecuador. Perhaps it was because I was no longer wearing hand-sewed flower figures or even my pollera skirts. I was in pants, and my cheeks were slowly losing their burn. Even when I wore my indigenous clothing, they just looked at me with wonder, forcing me to hide. But I'm an immigrant, a dreamer, no more hiding.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming. So I'm a little bit nervous as well. So my title is called Far Away. I lay awake in the darkness of the silent night, thinking of my beautiful querido barrio, where my mother's journey towards the American dream began. I was 2 years old when my mother and I left Mexico, and we came to the barrio. The barrio was dirty, crowded, filled with violence and poverty, but even with its flaws, I cherished it deeply. The barrio was home to me. Even though I was not born there, it was all I knew, from the murals to the noisy train that passed above our head, to the homeless men begging on the streets. In every corner of the barrio, there was a bodega, and I would go there to get my favorite drink, un jarrito de limón. The barrio was where I would see my tia Maria every day. She would come to check up on me while mommy worked her late shift as a waitress in Hermanos Taqueros. The barrio was where the chismosa vecina down the hall would generously invite us tostadas with pozole, but just to find out the latest chisme going around. The barrio, where my childhood friends Guadalupe, Karina, and Gloria lived, and were getting ready to embark on a new chapter in life, high school. When we moved from the barrio, we had to cross the Hudson River into New Jersey. I remember thinking to myself that if crossing the Hudson River and leaving the barrio was hard for me, how hard must it have been for my mom to cross the Rio Grande? To come to an unknown place where she could not speak the language, to leave behind her family and home, to come to the United States without any promise that anything would be okay, to leave and not know when she would be able to return. I never truly understood what made her leave. She always told me it was so I could have a better life, but sometimes I wonder if there's something more that she's not telling me. The day we left the barrio, I entered a place where I knew I would not belong. I went from an apartment with one room to living in a place with 2 floors, a pool, a garden, guest rooms, a chef, things I never even knew people had. I was far from the barrio now and no longer home. Now I was a person living in la casa de los ricos. This was my mother's new job, a full-time housekeeper and nanny to a rich family where she was required to live in. The MacArthurs hired my mother after the comadre Tania decided to go back to Mexico and recommended my mother for the job. The MacArthurs would not only be paying my mom more money than any other of her employers had, but were willing to let me live there as well. I did not want to leave the barrio, even if this place was bigger, cleaner, and richer, but I had no choice. We had to go. In this new place, there were no bodegas where I would get a taste for my motherland. In fact, there were no kinds of stores nearby. Here, there were no old men playing dominoes outside the apartments, but instead green lawns and gated houses. There were no words of ¿Qué pasa? And ¿Cómo estás? Instead, there were new words like Chanel, Prada, Christian Louboutins that I would never know even existed if I had never left my querido barrio. Thank you.
My piece, the title of my piece is, The Departing. Paola arrived at the apartment on a hot Friday afternoon in the middle of summer. Droplets of sweat came down to her forehead, and with her left hand, she wiped it away. Meanwhile, her right hand felt cramped from dragging the small suitcase. As she walked into the apartment, 5 faces looked back at her. She felt their stares, and her brown eyes looked back in wonder. She wondered if, like her, they were being torn apart from the womb of their home. You will stay with her for the next month until the paperwork is ready. You need to go with her, her uncle explained, as she was dragged away that morning from the safety of her grandmother's arms. She saw the wrinkles around the face of her abuelita. She envisioned the thick black braids that hung beneath abuelita's back, the maroon shirt tucked into a long pencil skirt, and the black moccasins in her feet. The last image she recalled were the tears rolling down her grandmother's cheeks as her uncle drove away into the city. In the city, she met the woman who was in charge of making the travel arrangements, the woman who, after payment, promised her family that she would safely arrive to Nueva York. There awaited her parents. After 8 years of being apart, the only memories she had of them were the photographs stored in a bottom drawer. Now, like the others, she was standing in an apartment, wondering her fate. "That's Melanie, Marco," the woman's sudden voice exclaimed as she just finished announcing their names. Paola now noticed that somewhere around her age, she had just turned 9. "Drop your stuff and we will go out for dinner as soon as you're ready," the woman quickly explained, barely glancing at her, and walked her to another room. 2 children were already there, and they quickly walked out. She wiped the sweat of her shivering hands on the sides of her jeans and dragged her suitcase to the corner of the bed. All she had brought were 3 changes of clothes, 2 pair of black shoes, and her undergarments. "Ready?" a booming voice called out. She quickly moved away from her belongings, not answering. That night, the dinner was bland chicken and fries. She was accustomed to the warm and savory flavor of a light soup. Within a few weeks, her appetite would diminish, and some nights she would go to bed on an empty stomach. When they arrived back at the apartment, out of courtesy, Paola quietly said, "Good night, señora," and turned to walk into her room. Soon after, the woman said, "Please, call me aunt. All the others do. Also, I want to speak with you. Take a seat." Paola crossed her arms in front of her, and she felt her throat tighten up. "Can I go home?" she whispered. "Oh, mija, you are. You will be meeting your parents soon." But that was not the response Paola wanted. "I am getting your identification and passport ready. That will be in the process within the next 2 weeks. From there, you will be trained on how to respond to the immigration questions. It's important you make no mistake. They won't let you pass, and worse, you will be held for questioning." Paola stayed silent, gathering her shivering hands in her pockets. She made sure to hide her face beneath her long black hair. She did not want her to see the tears gathering in her eyes. She barely listened, wanting to escape the heaviness of the enclosing walls. "Can I go now?" she suddenly said, and without waiting for a response, ran to the room assigned to her. As soon as she was in bed, she let the tears fall, and the muffled sound of her sobs between the pillows in a bed of a stranger. The next night, the tears had dried out, and only the swelling had stayed. This time, with her eyes closed, she prayed. She prayed because if she was sure that if she didn't, she would not have the will to continue living any longer. As the sounds of departing her home, as the wounds of departing her home seemed to grow bigger with time, and each time she prayed, the face of her grandmother appeared, a woman whose bright eyes and warm smile had last said to her, "Your parents will bring me after you." At that moment, Paola had believed her.
Hi everyone, thank you for coming. So my piece is untitled. It's actually untitled, there's no title. Okay. I still remember that day. That day my cousin was murdered and the vivid nightmare I had of the four horsemen just moments before. He was the last family member I had left. We had no siblings and our parents had been murdered by gang violence. My cousin and I planned to move to the United States to escape the violence that Honduras has been plagued with. We saved $11,000 from our jobs as farm workers to be able to pay the coyote and start a new life in the US. He was murdered 4 days before the day we planned to begin the journey north. His death was one of the few that I did not witness. He had 4 bullet holes in his chest when I found him behind a pale green pickup truck. His body was still warm and his eyes were wide open, but the life that they once had was not there anymore. He was among 4 other people killed that day, in my neighborhood at least. His blood flowed from the bullet wounds on the street and created a puddle of fiery red blood. The pale green pickup truck made me think about the nightmare I had earlier that day. It started as a pleasant dream. I saw colorful birds gliding throughout the park between the tall green trees. My nose captured the aroma of the roses, lotuses, orchids, and tulips, while my ears were filled with the beautiful music of the birds. My vision was filled with the vibrant colors as I felt the sun's rays softly touch my face. Then, quite suddenly, the bright blue sky was eclipsed by swarms of hellish red clouds. The music from the birds stopped, and they all morphed to pitch black crows and with toxic red eyes. The flowers all turned to black roses, and the once lively green grass was now brown and lifeless. A frenzy of lightning bolts then appeared in the dark red sky. That's when I saw them, the 4 horsemen. The horse on the far left was bright white, with its rider wearing a golden crown with rubies, and holding a stern wooden bow in his left hand. The horse next to it was fiery red, with its rider holding a large sharp sword in his left hand. The following horse was pitch black, with its rider holding a pair of scales. Last, the horse on the far right was pale green, with its rider holding a scythe. That's when I knew that the rider was dead. Suddenly, the sound of the thunder shook the earth, and I felt the sound's vibration throughout my body. The crows started squawking viciously and began to circle around me in the air. The horses stood 20 feet tall and then doubled in size when they raised their 2 front legs, reaching toward the lightning-filled crimson sky. Then they all lowered their 2 front legs onto the black roses and dead grass, and I found myself paralyzed. They started to run towards my direction, and I woke up moments before they had a chance to attack me. That nightmare revealed to me the harsh reality that I would face just moments later. The 4 horsemen were not able to attack me, but they had a chance to pierce into my cousin's chest. To me, it was the end of days. My last family member died, and I felt alone. Although my neighbors were good people, I felt that gangs would corrupt them at any moment. My cousin was buried 2 days after his death, and I spent the following days sitting by his grave. I always knew that one day one of us would be a victim to the violence so I had prepared myself for it. My cousin and I agreed to go to the United States no matter what, so that we could have the hope and opportunity we always needed. I started my journey north on our scheduled date and endured all the hardship that I faced to finally get here. I found a job as a construction worker in New York City, working for 4 years and living in an apartment share with 4 other guys. Throughout the years, I have been subject to remarks of hatred and physical aggression. I always hear the phrases, "go back to your country," and "no one wants you here." And I always wondered why people say that. Why is there so much hate for people who look different? They tell me to go back to my country, but I find myself without a country, as the country where I was born wants to kill me, and this country wants to throw me out. Then again, I always wonder why people attach themselves to the country and are defined by it. It was by chance I was born in Honduras and given the label at birth as a Honduran. I am not Honduran. I am not American. I'm an individual who wants to better himself and help anyone that needs it. Even after my experience of violence, fear, despair, loneliness, and hopelessness, I still did not have the hate in me, and all I want is peace and prosperity among human beings. So why is it that others still hate when they have not experienced what I have? Is it selfishness and fear that drives their hate, or is it something else? I have survived in the U.S. for 4 years, but I have not lived. I never have. I have experienced physical violence in Honduras and experienced a systematic oppression here. Is my life just a personal sugar-coated apocalypse, or is there still hope for me and others like me? I don't believe this is the hope that my cousin and I were looking for, to replace violence with a subtle, suppressive apparatus that gives false hope. War, famine, pestilence, and death are all around us, but we choose to ignore them. Perhaps this fear of the truth drives some of the hate that controls people, and perhaps the four horsemen have invaded their hearts. Thank you.
Hi everyone, Marian. I also do not have a title because I could not decide on one. As soon as my ESL class finished and I exited the building, I heard my mother's blaring voice to the left. "Mommy," she yelled as she honked. I desperately motioned for her to stop as all my classmates turned to stare. I kept my head low and made a run for the car. I ran into warm, honest arms and a shower of kisses. I still felt the stares from the front of my school, but I did not care. All I wanted to do was to go back home. I entered my house. The warm aroma of sancocho welcomed me. In the distance, I heard faint salsa playing on the radio as my grandma hummed along. The smell of pine cleaner radiated from the glossy hardwood floors. My mother placed burning sage in a bowl, which added to the conglomeration of aromas. On top of the dinner table, I see the trumpet of the swan. I never realized until now how this book was almost like my own memoir. Like the swan, I was a mute searching for my trumpet so that I could communicate with other swans. Each page of this novel was still a complete enigma to me. I opened up my notebook and continued where I left off, translating each and every word to the best of my ability. My clueless mother would sit down beside me and cheer me on. "Eso, hágale que ya casi termina." I was not even halfway. A day came where I no longer attended ESL classes. I ignored the salsa and the hums. The sancocho was just soup. The trumpet of the swan was bent and wrinkled from 3 years of translating. My accent mimicked the ones on television and in movies. It created a larger gap between my family and me. My sense of belonging had just disappeared. I envied those who could go back to Colombia. I'm sorry. I envied those who could go back to Colombia and bask in the beauty I only experienced through pictures and others as memories. I'm so sorry. One summer, my family from Colombia came to visit, and I could not help but wonder what my immediate family would have been like if we had stayed in Colombia. That same night, the warm fragrance of real coffee filled every corner of our home. The relatives distributed Colombian candy, and it only reminded us of the lives we had left behind. The milky lollipops and fruity chews felt so foreign in my mouth, even though I had grown up eating them. Soft vallenatos played in the background, and for a moment I believed nothing had changed from my childhood. My mind felt at ease and had no obligation to turn into something I truly resented. A relative grabbed my arm and told me to dance with her. I was dancing with a stranger, yet I felt so at home. The music filled me with goosebumps, and my entire family joined in with longing voices and dancing.
It felt as though our hearts broke in unison, thinking about sweet Colombia, being in our own home tonight, yet physically so far away. That night I laid in bed, staring at the dusty shelf filled with my English spelling bee trophies and my writing awards. I thought about how similar I was to the swan. I had found and learned how to use my trumpet. But unlike the swan, I was unable to be fully satisfied. The voices of others echoed around me and filled every corner of my room. You don't look Colombian. You don't look like an immigrant at all. Then what am I supposed to look like? Your English is pretty good for an immigrant. I remembered walking to school on a brisk morning. My iPod shuffled and a Juanes song came on. My fingers instinctively tried to skip the song. I was afraid others would hear it and judge me, but I let it play. I found myself humming and singing along to the song in Spanish, and it animated my life for a few minutes. I then noticed a group of girls looking back at me, and I quickly turned down the volume. My cheeks were flushed. Do I feel embarrassed in front of the girls, or in front of Juanes, or both? My bones feel neither American nor Colombian. The country I had worked so diligently to be a part of only accepts parts of me, while the country I separated from longed for my return. If I could not go back, does that make me American? No. Are you telling me I don't receive financial aid for college, even though I have worked myself to the bone? Yes. If I do manage to go to college, what happens then? I don't know. Thank you.
First of all, congratulations. You guys are amazing. I'm so proud. I'm just like bubbling up with pride. And maybe just a few of you can talk about it, maybe who feel the strongest about it, but what was this process like for you, working with talented authors and developing your own work and finding your voice while you were doing it?
So I could either pass you the mic, but I think you should stand and look at the audience, or I don't know if anyone wants to come all the way up here, but I can make it easy.
Okay, through my experience, I can say that working with Álvaro and Enrigue and my peers was a wonderful experience. After walking through a desert, I found this oasis where I learned that life flowers even though there is no water or hope sometimes. But through writing and through expressing my thinking, it is like coming out of the shadows where they keep us as stars without light, but our light will always be lit everywhere we go. As for example, on this stage, where many other people that fight every day, where all of us as immigrants, songs, any way or another, we fight for living, for living in a better world. And just resuming, it was an amazing experience.
And what made this so easy for us is because we're around people who have experienced something close to what we experienced. It was easy for your creative mind to flow because you're not scared or anything. When we would share with each other what we're writing, and we weren't scared to tell each other our stories, and it's very freeing to do that with these individuals. And also, Enrique is a very funny guy. He's very fun to be around, and it was a wonderful environment. That's all. Thank you.
I have to say I'm very It was a very extraordinary experience. It's one of those one of a kind experiences that we got. And I think while we were in the process, we just got surprised at ourselves that we didn't know what words we had within ourselves. We didn't know what stories we could create, and I think that's the beauty of the project that we did. I mean, at first we didn't know each other. We just know, we're just CUNY students. That's all we share. But it was truly amazing. It was hard work. At first we were shy. I will say that. But I have to say, the pieces, I give props to everyone because you guys truly did. Álvaro too, with all your feedback, it was really amazing. Thank you.
That was a great question, so thank you for asking. Does anyone else have another question in the audience? Yeah.
Hi, my name is Alejandra. Your poems were awesome. So I have 3 questions because I really like your poems and a few lines stood out to me. So I kind of would like to ask you to elaborate on the lines of the poems. So I'm gonna just say them. And I'm really bad with names, so I'm sorry if I don't remember your name. Okay, so I really liked the line. Where you said that your father was an angel in exile. So yeah, can you elaborate a little on that? And I have more lines. And I also really like the line where you said that you have survived, but you have never lived. So what would you consider living? And in what parallel universe would you say that you would be alive? And the next one, and you mentioned that your hearts broke in unison when you were dancing. Why did you say break in unison? And because I think that was a very good choice of words. Yeah, so those are my questions.
Thank you.
Okay, so the imagery I was trying to evoke in that sentence, my father being an angel in exile, is when I would wake up, it'll be dark. So, and there'll be like one spotlight on top of him. So, and his head will be down, his eyes will be sort of dark. So, the angel part comes with, that's my father, I love him. And exile, when somebody's putting in exile, they're, downtrodden. And also, exiles sometimes are also immigrants. So, it just worked really well with him being downtrodden, but also being sort of illuminated. Like there's like a duality in that, so that's why I said angel in exile. Yeah.
Okay, the next line was survive but never lived. In what parallel universe would you live? Also, thank you so much for the questions. Amazing and on point, so thank you.
Okay, so for me to be alive is like be genuinely happy. So you don't have this fear of violence, of experience these hatred words. And in a parallel universe where I'll be truly alive is like being with family, being with friends that genuinely wants you to be happy. They give you love, they give you shelter, a home. Yeah, that's it.
And who wrote The Heart Was Broke in Unison? Mariana.
It's a weird name back over here. I wrote that because I was trying to express how, although my experience might have been different from my mom's, it's like assimilating. She's right there with her camera pointing. Although our experiences were different, assimilating process. I felt like in the end we both had the same feelings, like we want to go back. We want to know what it's like if we were back there. And I know my mom is always talking about going back, and holidays here aren't the same thing for her. So I felt like that, I was trying to express that, how we were all kind of experiencing the same kind of sadness together. Yeah.
I think we have time for like one last question. If anybody out there wants to dare and ask the last question. Yes? Would you like me to take the mic? I can do it. Or you're welcome to come to the stage.
Thank you. I really enjoyed everybody's work tonight. I wanted to ask, you guys talked about really, some of the readers talked about, well, afterwards we talked about just struggle and adversity, and people have talked about their experience, some of the difficulty. But in being in this class, did any of you find that by doing the writing that you were able to kind of explore a part of yourself, maybe a more vulnerable part of yourself that you allowed yourself to previously? Or a different part of yourself that you hadn't explored so much? Did the writing allow that?
For me, I tend to hide stuff. So writing really brought out my sad memories and stuff that I tried to keep closed off. And I felt free kind of from writing, but I do not like writing, but I do like writing. So yeah, for me it was just emotional writing.
Anyone else would like to share their answer? Yes?
On my part, one thing that I learned is that I had to be stronger than I have been. For example, I had to control my tears inside me. And through writing, I cried, but I promised not to do it anymore. And that's what I did. And I liked it.
I think, so let's see, one last question, unless I see a hand that someone wants to ask something else. I want to ask anyone, what is your biggest takeaway from the course that you took? And just to remind, and as we're coming to a closing, this was a writing series of CUNY Dreamers with Penn, and it's part of the Penn World Voices Festival. And so this allowed you all to work together to hear different stories. Often as dreamers and as folks who are undocumented, we think that when we come to the US, our story is the only story. So you were able to hear stories and work about 8 weeks together. And so what was one main takeaway that you would like to share with us? Something magical, an anecdote of this past 8 weeks?
Well, one thing came back to mind when I was looking at this video and about how to talk to people, and it basically said you everybody is kind of like a present, like a gift wrapped. So hearing the stories, hearing what people have been through, you wouldn't see it, in their exterior. And when you hear it, it's shocking, and you feel closer to them, even if they're not even looking at you. But you feel closer to them. You feel like you're sort of a part of their more intimate side, and you shouldn't And it's just very eye-opening. Like, you shouldn't, judge people. You shouldn't. When hearing these stories, it just reinforced that idea. You shouldn't judge people, and that's it. Yeah.
For me, it was just a good learning experience to not be afraid of looking back into our past or looking back into what we've been through and just speaking the truth of our experiences and sharing it with everyone here and sharing it with the author that helped us, Álvaro. It was a fantastic experience.
Anyone else wants to answer? Yes, come.
I think that as immigrants, we tend to hide that we are, and I know it can be scary telling another person. And through the workshop, we discovered that there's many other people like us, and we should be out there promoting our stories and letting the world know that we struggle just how you struggle, and you shouldn't, like Dale said, you shouldn't judge. You don't know how hard somebody has tried and or what they've been through to get here, So, always keep an open mind. Thank you.
So we're gonna